It's a tale as old as time to suggest that horror media reflects and mirrors the fears and unnamed truths of the society that created it. The calls from serial killers in 80s movies were a reaction to the harassment of women made possible by new technology. The chaos in destroyed cities and realization that the military sworn to protect us might just be doing the opposite in 28 Days Later reflected the paranoia in a post-2001 world. And the desolate world of The Walking Dead reflected the nihilistic loss of faith in institutions meant to keep us safe, showing us that the line between ourselves and savages is thinner than we thought. But you know what all these things have in common? They all focus on people. But the Backrooms asks of its viewer a slightly different question. Not to consider what scares us about the people around us, but about the walls that surround us. Because you've been surrounded by walls your entire life, with the mere faith that nothing could pass through them. A faith that the Backrooms pulls out from under you.
Chad keeps trying to pitch me on his idea of the front rooms, unliminal spaces in which there are meaningful activities making you want to stay. And I keep telling him, Brogan, that is not a dimension. That is your house. So the Backrooms movie came out recently and quickly asserted itself as the most analysed piece of media of all time. Do I think I have something to add to this discussion? Yes, because most of the commentary on this movie has been focused around the lore, explaining the literal events showed and implied on screen. And in my opinion, this focus has come at the expense of something else, analysing the movie's themes. And no, I'm not doing the media literacy thing. That term was popularised by people so incapable of understanding that men can have platonic friendships that they insist that everything is gay, then get mad at media when it doesn't give them what they want, personally calling it baiting. This is not BreadTube, despite what I look like. All I'm here to do is explain the reasons I love this film, because I've yet to see anyone else articulate them. So let's start at the beginning with Clark. Clark is an unusual character because he has a lot going for him. He attended a prestigious school with implied great extracurriculars. He clearly has a gift for drawing and understanding architectural space. Seeing his pirate persona honestly makes me think he was the kind of guy who did improv club in uni, a great guy to get a drink with. He's also curious and brave. Unlike most people, he isn't afraid to explore an unknown space where he's vulnerable. Which is strange, given that Clark is also a man who hates his life, hates himself, stuck in a job he never wanted. Because there's another side to Clark's character. Clark is also a blatant piece of shit. He snaps easily when recording a simple video, and despite not a single customer coming to his store in the entire film, he refuses to take on any constructive criticism that maybe Captain Clark's Ottoman Empire is a bizarre and counterintuitive name.
Are you like a pirate? Or a sultan. Just be good to establish these things. Shut up.
He at least once blatantly drunk drives while in a populated area, he's implied to be a scammer, and he abuses his authority over two teenagers to, without their knowledge, put them in mortal danger while ignoring Kat's constant pleas to leave. And it's worth noting that that last one is part of a pattern. There are, at a stretch, only 4 female characters that Clark interacts with in this entire film, and he's shown to be abusive to every single one of them. Kat, his employee, has her concerns repeatedly ignored to her death, and it's even implied that he did things to her dead body despite seemingly leaving Bobby alone. Barbara, his ex-wife, had to deal with his constant drunkenness and fight starting, to the point where even in his own biased recollection of their last fight, he feels the need to bring up that he owns the house, making her financially dependent on him. As some implicit threat to excuse his refusal to treat her well, his only interaction with the still life version of her is to bark instructions across the room to turn off the lights before mutilating her and insisting that her kind doesn't feel pain, despite there being evidence that they do, which we'll get into in a bit. And the final female, Mary, he repeatedly uses as a proxy to vent his frustrations about his wife, despite never truly being interested in a thing she has to say, before choking her unconscious and using her as a tool for his sick fantasy. Which begs the question, how did he get so fucked up? I've seen a few people online argue that Clark is some one-dimensional villain who turns evil the second the plot requires it of him. But in my opinion, the film gives us plenty of clues that flesh out Clark as a nuanced character, broken in multiple discrete ways, with his emotional compound fractures layering on top of each other to form the person he is today. And it was so many people missing this fact which caused me to state that the Backrooms hid its best metaphor in plain sight. So who is Clark really? Clark is a furniture salesman. Buying furniture is usually the sign of a new beginning. You buy furniture when moving house, which usually coincides with a marriage, a new job, or just wanting to chase opportunity. Which is ironic, right? Because those are exactly the new beginnings which Clark lacks. He dreams of being an architect, but never actually achieved it, never got to move to the big city, and so his day-to-day is a mockery. Clark is forced, day in, day out, to help people achieve the very thing that he's incapable of acquiring himself. But this doesn't just happen at work, it happens every time he comes home. You want to know the only actual description of Barbara that the film gives us? It's that she's a 30-year-old freshman.
Who do you think pays for everything while you're gallivanting around campus like a 30-year-old freshman?
And objectively speaking, that is an incredibly noble thing to be. The film implies that Barbara was dealing with some unnamed mental health problem, and so it's damn impressive that she was willing to push past these, re-enter education as an adult to continue pursuing her dreams. But once again, that's a reminder to Clark of everything that he could be. A reminder that the reason he isn't an architect is because he isn't willing to pick himself up and become one. Because it's clear as day that Clark never wanted to be a furniture salesman, or more accurately, he never wanted to stay a furniture salesman. Because it's pretty common for people, even brilliantly intelligent people, to work means as an ends job straight out of uni, to buy the time they need to build themselves up and work towards their true passion. We often call these stepping stone jobs transitional periods. But you know what word is a perfect synonym for transitional? Liminal. Because the original horror of liminal space photography was in taking these sections of the world that you're meant to ignore, mere hallways on the road to your destination, and stretching them out to fill the entire frame, utilizing the unique property of photography as still and unchanging to utilize that nagging suspicion that you're not supposed to linger here, and then forcing you to sit with it. So consider what it might mean that in depicting Clark as a man stuck in a transitionary job, that the film has recreated that fear. Not with space, but with time. This is not the scene in which Clark gets stuck in a liminal space. This is. Because Clark's been there all his life, which is what leads us to the final act.
Clark re-enters the Backrooms and stays there for a while. Remember that the original mythology of the Backrooms was always that people can end up there at random with no way out. And so the pointed choice to change that fact, to make it so that Clark chooses to stay there, much like how he chose the complacency of his daily life, is telling. And like, man, the second I saw the shot, I knew something was going to pick up that camera. And even when it happened, it still got me. From the growth of his beard and decomposition of Kat's head, we can guess that he's been alone in there, ruminating for at least a few days straight. The lights in the Backrooms are always at maximum humbuzz, and so without a day or night cycle, it's safe to assume that he might not have slept in days. Clark in this period reminds me of Ratman from the Portal comics, a man slowly going insane in an endless mono-colored maze. And just like Ratman, Clark starts writing on the walls. And so Clark continues and chokes Mary unconscious, as she wakes up to the best scene in the film. Clark demands that Mary gives him a therapy session. When I watch horror, I like to imagine how I'd act in this situation, to feel the characters' fear with them. And in this scene, I had no idea what I'd do. Do you try and placate the crazy person's ego, or do you soothe them in a way to avoid violence? Either way, Mary does the opposite. She tells Clark the truth, for the first time in his life. Because Clark's fundamental flaw isn't his anger issues, or his lack of empathy, or even his misogyny. Many people have dealt with those and come out on the other end better for it, with stable relationships. Barbara had her unnamed mental health conditions, and continued to go on to fucking law school. Mary had a fucked up childhood, and became a successful therapist. The deeper problem preventing him from improving is the fact that at his core, he doesn't want to. This man with clear gifts squanders his endless potential because at the end of the day, he wants the outcome. To call himself an architect, to have the beautiful home with people at his table, but doesn't want to put in the work. The real work
to get those things. At the beginning of this video, I described Clark as curious and brave. Unlike most people, he's unafraid to explore unknown spaces where he's vulnerable. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Clark is a man who, after a fight with his wife that he caused by returning home drunk, leaves instead of facing the conflict head on, and then proceeds to sleep in a warehouse every night for possibly years because he refused to return home. He's so used to running away from vulnerability that he'd rather live in a death trap than muster the courage to look himself in the mirror. As Mary would say, he's repeating old patterns. Which is why I was so mad when I saw people claiming that Clark switches into a villain too fast. Because this is exactly who Clark's been his entire life. The darkest aspect of this scene that I've yet to see anyone mention is that the second Barbara Stilllife hears Clark coming, she runs away and cowers in the corner. We know that this isn't an inherent feature of still lives, as the others don't do this, and so the implication is that the Backrooms remembers this being a part of Mary's character. Does that mean that Clark was physically violent to her before? Clark being an abuser certainly fits with everything we know about his character. Either way, this scene marks the end of Clark's life, as he's given the answer and then refuses to take it, literally consuming himself in the process. And it's at this point that the movie switches main character to Mary.
Mary in the opening was shown to have grown up with a paranoid, likely schizophrenic mother, and it's my theory that Mary's mother might have been one of the first people to enter the Backrooms. The film clearly shows that locations with portals often end up getting recreated. The Async office has a portal and it gets recreated, Clark's store has a portal and it gets recreated. And so the fact that the film takes pains to show us Mary's childhood home in the Backrooms could suggest that there was once a portal there too. It would explain her mother's paranoia. After all, we hear her say, "They're all over the place."
They're all over the place.
And so she clearly believes in some kind of threat that might first appear human. And what would be more likely to give you that fear than seeing a still life? Because thematically, if Mary's arc both begins and ends with her being trapped in the home of a victim of the Backrooms, I find that cycle extremely poetic. Because Mary's entire belief system is that when humans encounter trauma, they enter loops, searching for the same solutions over and over again, hoping each time that they'll take you somewhere new. And while she accuses Clark of this, she's drawing a self-portrait. The fact that the first shot we see of her is literally her revisiting a physical space representing a trauma is a not-so-subtle emphasis of this fact. Mary spent her entire childhood trying and failing to heal the mental health of her mother, only to spend her entire adulthood trying and failing to heal the mental health of people like Clark. But the truth that Clark was supposed to see is that he is the only person capable of helping himself.
As much as I tried, it's just not up to me.
And the ironic twist is that truth is exactly what Mary needs to hear as well.
I can't save anyone.
And it's only when she musters the bravery to admit that she's incapable of helping that she becomes free. I used to call this channel a self-improvement channel, and I've slowly moved away from that because I found that talking about meaning and community were better ways of getting at that same message. But man, this is the one thing that truly is yours and yours alone, the self in self-improvement. Because mustering the bravery to admit the path you have to walk on is something that no one can do for you. And I think that that's appropriate. Because at the end of the day, this was a production drenched in bravery. The bravery to invest in a first-time director, the bravery to adapt a web series. And it was that bravery which was able to force the film industry out of the limiting space it had been trapped in for years, as a flurry of medium-budget, high-concept original horror movies outperformed the entrenched classics that were beginning to feel like a copy of something we loved, misremembered. And so it's poetic that bravery is what I'd class as the film's main theme. To boil it down to a single message, it'd be this. Sometimes in life, you are going to undergo hardship and end up no-clipping out of the comfort you take for granted, falling into a life you never expected, a liminal period of survival and perseverance. If you have the bravery to make it through these periods, letting go of the past and taking responsibility for your faults, you can do something no one thought possible. But if you take the easy way out and refuse to grow, your trauma will metastasize, eating you alive until you become a parody of yourself. And unless you have the bravery to make it out the other side, you might just get stuck in that liminal space forever.